friends, welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show. I'm Scott Horton. My website is weekendinterviewshow.com. I keep all the archives for you in MP3 format there, free to download. Also, I've forgotten to mention this the last 6 or 7 weeks I've been up here doing this show, but we got the podcast thing there too, so you can subscribe for the podcast, and any new interviews you'll get automatically downloaded there. Also, I write for antiwar.com, and I'm looking at antiwar.com right now. According to the Casualties of War page, 1,790 American soldiers have died in Iraq, and one man who's not going to be added to that list is Kevin Benderman. He's refused to be redeployed to that country, and I have his wife on the phone now, Monica Benderman. Her husband, Kevin, was acquitted Thursday of desertion, but convicted on a lesser charge for failing to show up and go to Iraq last January 7th. He was sentenced to 15 months in the brig. Welcome to the show, Monica.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you on today. How are you holding up?
I appreciate it. Well, we're hanging in there, you know. We've got to fight and got to keep Kevin safe.
I assume that you guys are appealing this decision.
Well, the appealing process is an interesting process. The attorneys submitted the initial paperwork at the trial, which is what's needed, to the judge. But once the conviction is actually confirmed by the convening authority, that's when the actual appeal process can start. And there is a precedent in past cases where the convening authority hasn't really confirmed the conviction until after the sentence has been fulfilled.
Oh, can they do that?
Well, apparently, because they've done it. And so we're not sure. You know, we can't say that that's the route they're going to take this time, but we know in the past that that has been done. Basically, what happens is the judge submits her sentence and with a recommendation. You know, I recommend this conviction. I recommend this sentence. And then the convening authority, which is the garrison commander, can actually say, you know, I think it needs a reduced sentence. I think, you know, he should serve less time. I don't think it's that big a charge.
So it's really up to the guy in charge of the brig, not the judge, huh?
Up to the guy in charge of the installation where Kevin is stationed. Because he won't serve his time necessarily at Fort Stewart.
Right.
He'll go to either Fort Sill, Fort Knox, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The convening authority, Colonel John Kidd, is actually the one that's going to have to say, okay, I approve of this conviction, I approve of this sentence, and until he does that, the actual appeal process can't start.
I see. And do you know what is the typical time frame for that to take place? When they're not deliberately dragging it out?
I can tell you that there was a very high-profile case not that long ago in which the soldier served his full sentence, and the conviction wasn't signed until after he was out.
Man, all right. So the reports that I've been reading have said that the 15 months was a pretty harsh sentence, that you guys had been expecting less. Is that right?
Well, it was a harsh sentence all around. When you figure that all they're saying, the facts proof, was that Kevin didn't go to the plane that night. They're not saying that anything except for the fact that Kevin missed that flight. There were 2 other flights later on the following week. Kevin reported for duty as he should have Monday morning, and if they truly wanted to get him for refusing to deploy, well, they needed to see if he was going to get on one of those 2 flights. And another concern that we have is that if he truly had refused to deploy at that meeting with his sergeant major, it would seem to me that a sergeant major, with the years of experience he must have had, when Kevin said, I'm going to refuse to get on that plane, there would have been NPs in the office. They would have been detaining Kevin and telling me, go get his equipment. He's getting on that plane, and we're going to see to it. There was none of that.
Well, what happened instead?
What happened is that command sergeant major said, go home and work on your CO packet. It's going to be a lot of work.
Your CO packet, that's your conscientious objector.
Conscientious objector packet, yes. Mm-hmm. Now, was there a discussion of refusing to deploy? You know, Kevin basically invoked his rights. The command sergeant major said it was, 15 or 20 minutes into the conversation before he read Kevin his rights. He read Kevin his rights the minute Kevin walked in the door. Before anything was said, the minute Kevin walked in the door, Kevin invoked his rights and didn't say anything. Sergeant Major said, hey, let's talk Kevin to Sam. You know, forget the soldier stuff. Let's just be a couple of buddies, talk Kevin to Sam. And basically said, hey, when you're flying? Kevin said, no, haven't a clue. Nobody's giving me a time yet. Said, okay, what are you going to do? Kevin said, well, I'm filing for CO status. It would seem that chances are I would refuse to deploy because filed for CO status. I would have to uphold my belief.
Right.
But never was given an order. From that point, I was in the office at the time. From that point on, the discussion that ensued was about his CO application, the process that he was going to have to go through, how hard he was going to have to work on it. And the Command Sergeant Major released Kevin to go home and work on his CO packet. So he went back to work 2 days later with everything completed for his CO packet. On that day, he was working just as any normal work day. On the following day, the Tuesday, they said, we're going to charge you with AWOL. Okay, well, why are you just getting around to doing it now? Why aren't you putting me on a plane? Why aren't you trying to charge him with AWOL? And then actually 2 weeks later, they charged him with desertion and missing movement.
Okay, now I talked to Debbie Clark, who's been covering the story for antiwar.com.
Yes.
And she told me that this Command Sergeant Major, that he had a little bit of trouble keeping his story straight about what he told Kevin and when. What exactly was going on there, and what significance is there?
Well, there's been a series of testimonies here. We've had several hearings in this case, as you know. We've had the court-martial overturned at the first one. The Article 32 started again. And in each one of those cases, the Command Sergeant Major had to testify. He also had several sworn statements. He had four. He lost one of them. 4 different sworn statements in which he wrote what he felt had transpired that night. Each one of those sworn statements was different. He had 3 different testimonies. He had the 2 from the previous 2 Article 32 hearings, and he had the one from the court-martial itself. In this particular court-martial, when he testified that he did not read Kevin his rights until later on in the meeting, and that Kevin had actually said, I refuse to deploy, I'm not getting on the plane, I refuse to deploy, 3 times before he had his rights read to him. So he was challenged by our defense attorneys to read his testimony from the previous 2 Article 32 hearings. And he was given the paperwork for that. And he read his testimony. He said, yes, this is my testimony. This is what I said. And the defense attorney asked him to read it. And in both instances, on both of those testimonies, he said, when we entered my office, I immediately read Sergeant Benderman his rights. I told him it was as a precaution. Sergeant Benderman asked me if he was being charged with anything. I said no. I was doing it as a precaution for any conversation that we were going to have. Sergeant Benderman invoked his rights. I proceeded to question him, and he proceeded to refuse to answer my questions.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is, now that at the court-martial, actually, the other day, he's showing up and saying, well, I didn't get around to reading him his rights until later, and he went ahead and he incriminated himself in front of me a few times before we got to that point.
Yes.
Is what he's saying now.
That's what he's saying now.
And it was based on that he was convicted?
I don't know what else there was, because that's really all there was.
That's really all there was. And, I guess this part is kind of confusing, that it's basically the whole charge here comes down to exactly what this officer told him and whether he should have believed that his officer knew. I read an article that said that, well, even if the officer did tell him what he says the officer told him, he should have known that the officer didn't have the authority to tell him what he told him. And is that what this whole trial is hanging on, is these little technicalities?
They're just trying to make a mockery of the entire command of the U.S. Army. I mean, everything that they're doing, and yes, the technicalities and the little tidbits of, well, so-and-so did this, they're taking their responsibility, they're shirking it. They're not accepting responsibility for the mistakes they made, they're blaming Kevin for it, just as they did with the larceny charges. I mean, it came out with the larceny charges. It was a mistake of the command of the unit, because they should have entered that Kevin did not deploy. They should have submitted that on the manifest. They didn't do their job right. They submitted that Kevin deployed along with 7 other soldiers from their unit.
And I read on BendermanDefense.org this morning that after the first investigator was dismissed, and maybe you can tell me why that happened in a minute, but the second investigator strongly recommended that the larceny charges be dropped because it was clearly just a mistake. And then,
yes.
But I guess the prosecutors went ahead and they just wanted to persecute your husband no matter what.
That they were going to get him. And as a matter of fact, that came out in the defense attorneys for this court-martial actually filed a motion to dismiss the larceny charges. They put the chief prosecutor, the chief counsel for the prosecutor's office, on the stand as a defense witness. And they, which was bizarre. but he's the one that basically made the determination about the larceny charges. And they questioned him because after the first Article 32 hearing was overturned, they went back into their offices, and we went and sat with our defense attorneys for a little while, and our attorneys left and came back, and they said, you know, if you really want to pursue this, we're there for you. We're going to do this. But the prosecution really wants to go away, and, you know, they want to know if you just go back to the initial Article 32 and they'll drop the larceny charges. And we said, what larceny charges? You know. Well, as it turns out, the chief prosecutor basically threatened the defense that if they did not revert back to the initial Article 32 hearing, that they would go ahead and bring these charges of larceny against Kevin. And so they used that as a mild form of a threat to keep Kevin from pursuing the second Article 32 hearing.
Wow. And why
he
was
admitted that on the stand.
Why was it that the first Article 32 hearing was overturned?
Because the judge saw implied bias in the actions of the investigating officer. There was a period of time when the investigating officer, Linda Taylor, actually worked opposite major sites, one in the prosecutor's office and one in trial defense. And it was a period of time that happened during OIF 1, which is when Kevin was serving the first time. Linda Taylor really wanted to be the investigating officer for this case, and she needed to prove her point because Major Sykes expressed concern, and of course he said he didn't want any part of it. And he obviously had a problem with that and expressed that in writing. So she needed to defend herself in a way to get herself appointed to it. Well, in a series of emails and memos sent to the convening authority and the prosecutor, never copied to the defense, he was arguing why her qualifications justified her to be in that position, even though the defense objected to it. She should have been copying the defense on all things.
Right.
She did not. The defense got a hold of one of the emails that she sent where she was listing her qualifications, and across the top of it, her chief qualification was that Sergeant Benderman did not desert during OIF 1. And so the implied bias was that he deserted during OIF 3.
OIS 1 and 3.
OIF meaning Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Yes.
And so there was implied bias, and that's what the judge saw, that by looking at that, one could assume that she was already believing that Sergeant Benderman was guilty of desertion.
Well, and she sort of got a point. And it's my understanding that in order to get conscientious objector status, you basically have to prove you've been a Quaker since you were 4.
No, it's not quite that. I mean, you know, obviously they're gonna want you to. It's going to be as difficult as possible, and there's no regulation that says that you have to be a member of a peace church or anything like that. The regulation actually reads that it does not have to be a religious basis, that it can be on moral and ethical grounds.
I see, but you must be opposed to all war from now on, no matter what, right?
You must be opposed to all. It doesn't mean that you can't defend your home or your family, but you must be opposed to war. Mm-hmm.
And, well, I kind of want to stick with the particulars of the trial here for a minute, and then maybe in the last 5 minutes after the next break we can come back and you can really tell me more about Kevin as an individual and who he is and why he's changed his mind. But there's still some things that are confusing to me about his situation, at least relative to the other guys in his unit. I read something this morning that said, I believe 60 people are missing from his same unit. Are they all being prosecuted as maliciously as he is?
No. It's kind of a funny little thing. When Kevin had already been charged with desertion and missing movement, he was fulfilling his duties. He was going to work every day. He was not under any kind of restriction. One of his duty assignments was to in-process back into the Army soldiers coming back into his unit who had been AWOL. Now, we had soldiers coming back into his unit that had been gone for 4 months, 6 months.
And
Those
just disappeared,
deserters.
Right? No contact, just gone.
Exactly. Those were deserters. Not only were they gone for 6 months, and a deserter is somebody who's missing anywhere from 30 days on. You're AWOL up till the 29th day, then you are listed as a deserter. So these guys are gone for 6 months. They missed movement, literally. They weren't anywhere around. Nobody could get in touch with them. Didn't know where they were, didn't report, nobody looked them in the eye. Missed movement, and then all of a sudden they decided once the deployment was over they were going to come back. Well, they came back, and Kevin's job was to process them back into the Army, which he did, and then the Army chaptered them out, just sent them home with a bad conduct discharge.
So why is it you think that they're picking on him?
Because Kevin is a strong individual. He has integrity. The soldiers responded to him. Working in the motor pool, Kevin saw that the work got done. He challenged his command if he didn't feel that they were treating the soldiers right.
And you look at a picture of the guy, he's 6'4". It looks like he's born to be a sergeant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is. He's the epitome of that sergeant look. I mean, that's Kevin. He's got broad shoulders. He's big. He's got a deep voice.
And instead of running away, he's saying, hey, I'm a conscientious objector. This is wrong.
Yes.
Now, that's different than just running away because you're scared like the rest of the guys in his unit who are all right.
Absolutely. He's standing there saying, this is what I believe. This is what I am. You cannot break me. And they have not been able to break him no matter what they threw at him. Even the sentence. Even the sentence in the courtroom. Kevin stood there. He took it. He said, yes, ma'am. He never lost his composure. I'm so proud of him because he never one time buckled.
Wow, this is really an incredible story. I guess this is what George Bush calls sending the message, right? We can't announce a timeline because that would send the wrong message. We must prosecute this giant white man sergeant from the South because we need to send the right message.
Yeah, but I believe that Kevin's sending the right message right back.
Oh, well, and his happens to actually be right, so it's probably going to outweigh theirs in the end, too.
Yeah.
Now, Debbie Clark told me that there was a documentary film crew around, and I wonder who were they and where will I be eventually able to watch a documentary about this?
Well, I will tell you, it's an organization called Luna Productions, and I don't know how much because I would have to talk to them about how far they want to, be brought out there until they're ready.
Okay.
We didn't discuss all of that with them at this point, so I want to be fair with them. But
it's all about him, or it's about?
We feel that it's about a positive in the movement, and the positive in the movement is taking a stand to defend soldiers, and to defend soldiers' rights, and to speak out to see that soldiers' rights are respected. And it's primarily Kevin's experiences, the reasons why he's done what he's done. It also involves Camila Mejia and Aiden Delgado. To a point, because we feel that these soldiers are there, they've been through it as well, and they speak for the soldiers also. Something that we feel, anti-war is great, it's making a statement and it's something that has to get out there, but we feel that the next push really needs to be a positive, okay.
Hold it right there, Monica, I'm sorry. Okay. We'll be right back, everybody, with Monica Benderman on the Weekend Interview Show.
Hello, this is Christine with BringThemHome.org. Are you a parent disinclined to seeing your sons and daughters used as mortar bait for the New World Order, with no end in sight to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, along with the looming possibility of an escalation of conflict into Iran and Syria? We need to send a definitive message to the warmongering politicians. Bring our troops home now. We have Bring Them Home magnetic ribbons, which are available in any quantity. Like the upside-down flag, these ribbons are inverted to symbolize a state of distress. Place these ribbons on your cars and help us wake up the sleeping public. Don't wait until the military draft is implemented. Don't wait until it's too late. Get your ribbons now. Your Bring 'em Home ribbons can be purchased at rbnlive.com or at bringthemhome.org or call 877-605-9200.
Friends, welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show. I'm Scott Horton. I'm talking with Monica Benderman. Her husband, Kevin, was convicted of missing movement by design Thursday in a military court-martial and was sentenced to 15 months in prison. The website you can look up and read all about this case is bendermandefense.org. And you were talking before the break, ma'am, about the welfare of the soldiers is really what he has at heart here. And I noticed there was an article in the Associated Press yesterday. This is the Army's numbers. 30% of the soldiers coming back from Iraq have serious mental problems. And that's the ones who come back with all their arms and legs and their head attached.
Yes. While they were complaining and talking about Kevin skipping his unit and not being responsible for soldiers and being responsible for low morale because he wasn't taking care of his soldiers, the weekend in question, what Kevin was doing was exactly helping a soldier. one of the soldiers in his unit had attempted suicide the day before, and they were giving him a very hard time and not allowing his wife her rights as far as seeing her husband and seeing that his needs were met. And Kevin spent the weekend making sure that everything was done the way it was supposed to be for this soldier. So, PTSD obviously is an issue. It's not even a question. Kevin's dad suffered through that during World War II. Kevin knows it firsthand. He lived with it. He grew up with it. He understands what it's like to be a soldier in Iraq. He's been there. He's seen it. And he's come back, and he knows what it's like on post to be under the stress and the pressure of getting ready for another deployment. There were 191 confirmed cases of child abuse in the 3rd ID between Fort Stewart and Fort Benning.
Really?
Just in the year between the 2 deployments.
Whoa.
Now, that's not out there, but we have pictures of the memorial where it was announced on Fort Stewart. Why aren't we announcing it on Fort Stewart? Why aren't we announcing it to the public who can make a difference? 191 confirmed cases of child abuse. That's a casualty of war.
And, we're seeing also the soldiers are coming back and they're getting crotch rocket motorcycles and going 250 miles an hour down the freeway, and they're basically dying in traffic accidents at rates comparable to the casualties fighting insurgents in Iraq.
Absolutely, and the soldiers are not taken care of. The soldier with the attempted suicide, he went AWOL because they were going to put him on the plane. 5 days after he attempted suicide, they were going to take him from the psych unit and put him on the plane and ship him to Iraq. While he was AWOL, he stayed in contact with his commander, and he said, look, I've been trying to get help for over a year. He was in Iraq during the first, the invasion. I want help. The commander said, come on back, we'll get you the help. He went to mental health. Mental health said, this soldier needs treatment under our care. You can't deploy him. Well, what did they do? They deployed him. They said, he'll get his care in Iraq.
Yeah, just kill some people. That'll make you feel better.
So he's there. He's there now. They told him he could not have his R&R. They gave him R&R in August. 2 weeks ago, they took it away, and they said it was a flight risk. He couldn't have it. Now, how's that going to help his morale? And yet they're saying that because Kevin said he's not going to participate in war anymore, it affected the morale of every NCO in his unit, and he needs to be punished for that. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, it makes me wonder about the case of Al Lorentz. Do you know about him?
No.
He wrote an article called Why We Cannot Win for LouRockwell.com. He was from Iraq. He's the former head of the Constitution Party here in Texas.
Yes, I did read that.
And they're prosecuting him for writing an article critical of the war policy.
Yes.
Oh, man, I'm sorry that we're out of time. I got more questions for you, but I want to recommend everybody go to BendermanDefense.org and read all about this case. How can we help? Is there a way that people can help with this case, Monica?
Please stay on top of it. And when I get an address for where Kevin will be, I will post it on that website. And everybody that can send letters, the more people stay on top of it and the more they know that Kevin is in the public eye, the better it's going to be for Kevin. And I need that so that we can then continue our work.
Great. Hey, thank you very much for your time today. I hope everything works out.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, everybody, we'll be back next week with the Weekend Interview Show. Check me out on antiwar.com.
The Bill of Rights protects every American's God-given right to keep and bear arms. Now that right is being seriously undermined as legally registered rifles are being confiscated in some parts of our country. If we're not careful, we may find ourselves with no right to own guns. And that's where Gun Owners of America comes in. Gun Owners of America is in Washington every day fighting for you to keep that right. Congressman Ron Paul has called GOA the only no-compromise gun lobby in Washington. You need to be part of this great grassroots group of activists who are keeping the heat on their members of Congress. Find out right now how you can join. Call 888-886-GUNS and get started receiving their fact-filled newsletters and action alerts. Call 888-886-GUNS or go to their webpage at gunowners.org and help make your voice heard in Washington. Make that call right now and call Gun Owners of America at 888-886-GUNS. Remember, it's not just about gun control, it's about control.
You're listening to RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.